9-year-old Oliver Hawthorne sat alone in his billionaire father's mansion, another failed math test hidden in his backpack, convinced he was stupid. The new maid, Nia Carter, watched him struggle with equations no third grader should face, her heart breaking because she knew exactly how to help him. But helping meant exposing the mathematical genius she'd been hiding for 3 years after powerful people threatened her life and stole her research. She'd sworn never to teach again, to stay invisible, to survive. But when Elias Hawthorne came home early one afternoon and heard his son laughing for the first time in years, he followed the sound and froze in the doorway, speechless. Because there stood the woman he'd hired to clean his floors, teaching Oliver university-level calculus, like a master professor, and nothing would ever be the same. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun filtered through the towering windows of the Hawthorne mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Oliver sat alone at the enormous dining table, his small frame dwarfed by the high-backed chairs surrounding him. The sound of his spoon scraping against the cereal bowl echoed through the empty room. He counted the tiles on the floor while he ate. 43 across, 27 down. Numbers were easier than words lately. Nia Carter moved quietly through the kitchen doorway, her dark eyes taking in the lonely scene. She'd worked in the Hawthorne household for 8 months now, and every morning felt the same. The boy ate alone. The father left before dawn. The mother hadn't set foot in this house for 2 years. Nia placed Oliver's backpack near the front door, making sure his water bottle was filled and his jacket was folded neatly on top. "Morning, Oliver," she said gently, her voice warm enough to cut through the coldness of the vast space. Oliver looked up briefly and managed a small smile. "Morning, Miss Nia." She noticed his shoulders were hunched forward, the way they always were on school mornings. Something about the way he gripped his spoon told her today would be difficult. Nia had developed an instinct for reading the silence in this house. It spoke louder than any conversation she'd ever heard within these walls. As Oliver finished his breakfast, Nia began clearing the table. That's when she saw it, the corner of a notebook sticking out from his backpack, covered in red marks. She shouldn't have looked, but the bold letters caught her eye. Failed. The word was circled twice, underlined 3 times. Nia's heart sank as she caught a glimpse of the problems scattered across the page. Advanced equations, algebraic concepts. These weren't third-grade problems. This was material that would challenge students twice Oliver's age. Oliver noticed her looking and quickly shoved the notebook deeper into his bag. His cheeks flushed, red, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's nothing," he muttered. But it wasn't nothing. Nia recognized those problems. She'd solved similar equations when she was in graduate school, back when her life had followed a different path entirely. Back when she'd stood at university chalkboards instead of cleaning them. "Oliver," she said carefully, sitting down beside him. "Can I see?" He hesitated, then slowly pulled out the notebook. His hands trembled slightly as he opened to the page with the worst grades. "Principal Gaines says I'm not trying hard enough, but I am trying, Miss Nia. I really am." Nia scanned the problems, polynomial expressions, basic calculus foundations. Someone at that school had completely misjudged what a 9-year-old mind could handle. Or perhaps they'd simply decided Oliver should keep up regardless of whether the material was appropriate. She felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "This problem here," she said, pointing to one equation. "Can you tell me what confuses you about it?" Oliver stared at it, his brow furrowed. "All of it. The numbers don't make sense. They just float there." Without thinking, Nia began to explain. "Think of it like building blocks. Each number has a relationship with the others, like how you and your dad are connected, even when you're in different rooms. She sketched a quick diagram on the edge of his notebook, breaking down the equation into smaller, manageable pieces. See? When you understand the pattern, the numbers stop floating. They land. Oliver's eyes widened as he followed her pencil. For a moment, the confusion cleared from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like recognition. "That makes sense," he whispered. Then he looked at her curiously. "How did you know that?" Nia froze. She'd said too much, moved too quickly. Years of keeping herself small and invisible had trained her better than this. "Lucky guess," she said, forcing a casual smile. "I've cleaned a lot of homework papers over the years." But Oliver was still watching her with those sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Before he could ask another question, Nia stood and glanced at the clock. "You'll miss the bus if we don't hurry." As she walked Oliver to the door, she felt the weight of her old life pressing against her chest. She'd promised herself when she took this job that she'd never teach again, never expose what she knew, never risk being found. Yet here she was, unable to watch a brilliant child drown in inappropriate expectations without reaching out a hand. Across the city, Elias Hawthorne stood in his corner office on the 47th floor, surrounded by glass and steel that reflected the morning light in sharp, angular patterns. He barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the man across from him, Dr. Rowan Pierce, his business partner and the source of his current headache. "The investors are getting nervous," Rowan said, his voice smooth but edged with something Elias couldn't quite name. Irritation, perhaps, or impatience. "They want guarantees that our security protocols are unbreakable." Elias rubbed his temples. "Our protocols are fine, better than fine. We've invested millions in cybersecurity." "But there are rumors," Rowan continued, leaning forward. "Whispers about corporate espionage, competitors trying to crack our systems. We need to be certain that nothing can breach our defenses." "Then hire better security consultants," Elias snapped. He was exhausted. 3 hours of sleep last night, 4 the night before. The numbers blurred together lately, just like everything else in his life. Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem distracted lately." "I'm fine. Your assistant mentioned you've been leaving early some days." Elias's jaw tightened. "Is there a point to this?" Rowan raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just concerned about my partner. We have too much at stake to lose focus now." After Rowan left, Elias stood at the window, looking down at the city below. Somewhere in that sprawl of buildings and traffic, his son was sitting in a classroom, probably struggling through another day. When had he last helped Oliver with homework? When had he last asked about school? The questions made him uncomfortable, so he pushed them away and returned to his desk. His phone rang before he could sit down. The school's number flashed on the screen. Elias's stomach dropped. "Mr. Hawthorne, this is Principal Gaines from Oliver's school." Her voice carried the practiced patience of someone delivering bad news. "I'm calling to discuss Oliver's academic performance, or rather, the lack thereof." Elias sat down heavily. "What's happened?" "Oliver is failing mathematics. He's withdrawn in class, refuses to participate, and appears to have no interest in learning the material. I've tried various approaches, but nothing seems to reach him." She paused. "Mr. Hawthorne, I have to be frank with you. I'm beginning to wonder if our school is the right fit for Oliver's academic level." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that perhaps Oliver would benefit from a less rigorous academic environment. A school that's more suited to his capabilities." Elias felt heat rising in his chest. "My son is intelligent." "I'm not questioning his intelligence, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm questioning whether he has the drive to succeed at this level. Perhaps with more parental involvement at home." "I'll handle it," Elias interrupted, his voice sharp. "Thank you for calling." He ended the call and sat in silence, staring at his phone. The guilt crept in slowly. the way it always did when he thought about Oliver. He was failing as a father. He knew it. Everyone knew it. But knowing didn't change the fact that he had no idea how to fix it. Back at the mansion, Nia found Oliver in the library, surrounded by textbooks but not opening any of them. He looked small and defeated, curled up in one of the oversized leather chairs. When he saw her, his eyes filled with tears he was clearly trying to hide. "Hey," Nia said softly, sitting on the ottoman across from him. "Rough day?" Oliver nodded, not trusting his voice. "Want to talk about it?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then in a voice so quiet Nia almost missed it, he whispered, "I'm stupid." Nia's heart broke. No, Oliver, you're not. Everyone thinks so. Principal Gaines thinks so. The other kids know it. Even Dad. His voice cracked. Dad doesn't even care enough to notice. Nia moved to sit beside him, and Oliver immediately leaned against her. She wrapped an arm around his small shoulders. "Listen to me very carefully. Intelligence isn't about how fast you answer questions or how many problems you solve correctly on the first try. Intelligence is about recognizing patterns, about seeing connections between things that seem unrelated, and you, Oliver Hawthorne, have that gift." "I do?" "Absolutely." Nia grabbed a piece of paper from the side table and drew a series of shapes. Circles, squares, triangles, arranged in a specific pattern. "Look at this. Can you tell me what comes next?" Oliver studied it, his brow furrowed in concentration. Slowly, understanding dawned on his face. A circle, because the pattern repeats every 4 shapes. Exactly. You saw the pattern. That's intelligence, Oliver. That's your brain working the way it's supposed to work. She smiled at him. "The problem isn't that you're not smart enough. The problem is that sometimes school teaches things in ways that don't match how your brain thinks. But that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you need someone who understands how to teach you in your language." Oliver looked up at her with hope shining in his eyes. "Could you teach me?" The question hung in the air between them. Nia felt the pull of it, the danger and the desire tangled together. This was exactly what she'd sworn she wouldn't do. Getting involved, revealing her knowledge, putting herself at risk of being discovered. But looking at Oliver's face, she couldn't find it in herself to refuse. "We can work on some things together," she said carefully. "Before school, maybe. Just you and me." Oliver threw his arms around her neck. "Thank you, Miss Nia. Thank you." That night, after Oliver had gone to bed, Nia stood alone in the kitchen. The house was silent except for the hum of appliances and the occasional creak of settling wood. She pulled out a worn notebook from her bag, one she'd kept hidden for years. The pages were filled with equations, proofs, theorems written in her own handwriting. Mathematical concepts that had once been her entire world. She ran her fingers over the faded ink, remembering the woman she'd been. The woman who'd stood at chalkboards in front of professors, explaining complex theories with confidence and joy. The woman who'd published papers that made academics twice her age take notice. The woman whose advisor had looked at her work and said, "You see math the way artists see color, Nia. You have a gift." Then she remembered the other part. The dark office. The man in the expensive suit. The threat delivered in a calm, measured voice. "Stop publishing. Stop teaching. Stop being brilliant, or we'll make sure you stop permanently." Nia closed the notebook and held it against her chest. Her voice was barely a whisper in the empty kitchen. I promised I'd never teach again. But promises, she was learning, were complicated things, especially when a child needed help, and she had the knowledge to give it. The next morning arrived with soft gray light filtering through Oliver's bedroom curtains. He woke before his alarm, something that hadn't happened in months. The excitement of having a secret with Miss Nia made his chest feel warm and light. He dressed quickly and hurried downstairs, where he found Nia already waiting in the small study off the main hallway. She'd set up a simple workspace at the desk. No textbooks, no formal materials, just some colored blocks, a deck of cards, and sheets of blank paper. Oliver slid into the chair, curious and slightly nervous. "We're going to play some games this morning," Nia said with a gentle smile. "Nothing scary, just patterns and puzzles, things that'll make your brain stretch in comfortable ways." She started with a simple exercise. Using the colored blocks, she created a symmetrical pattern on one side of the desk. "Can you make this pattern on your side, but as if you're seeing it in a mirror?" Oliver studied the arrangement. Red block in the corner, 2 blue blocks forming an L shape, a yellow block balancing on top. His hands moved carefully, placing each piece in its reflection position. When he finished, Nia grinned. "Perfect. Now what if we rotated the whole pattern 90 degrees? What would it look like then?" For the next 30 minutes, they worked through increasingly complex spatial puzzles. Nia never mentioned school or grades or failure. She simply presented each challenge as an interesting problem to explore. Oliver felt his confidence growing with each successful solution. His brain, which usually felt foggy and slow during math class, seemed to wake up and stretch like a cat in sunlight. "Now, let's try something with probability," Nia said, pulling out the deck of cards. "If I shuffle these and ask you to guess whether the next card will be red or black, what are your chances of being right?" Oliver thought about it. "Half? Because half the cards are red and half are black?" "Exactly. That's probability. Now what if I show you the first 5 cards and 3 of them are red? Does that change your guess for the 6th card?" Oliver's brow furrowed. This was trickier. "Some people would say yes, because more reds have come up. But the deck is still half and half, so it's still a 50-50 chance." Nia's eyes lit up. "You just understood something that trips up adults all the time. The cards don't have memory. Each draw is independent of the others, assuming we're not cheating." She laughed. "You have a mathematician's mind, Oliver. You just need someone to show you how to use it." Later that week, Oliver brought home a math worksheet that had made him cry the week before. He sat at the kitchen table with Nia beside him, and together they approached the problems. This time, when he looked at the equations, he remembered Nia's building block explanation. He broke each problem into smaller pieces, found the patterns, and worked through them step by step. When he wrote the final answer to the last problem, his hand was shaking. Not from fear this time, but from excitement. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Without anyone forcing him. Without tears. Without feeling stupid. Nia celebrated by doing a silly victory dance that made Oliver laugh so hard milk almost came out of his nose. "That's my brilliant student," she said, ruffling his hair. "You should be proud of yourself." Oliver beamed. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt intelligent, capable. Like maybe he wasn't the broken, stupid kid everyone seemed to think he was. At his office downtown, Elias made an impulsive decision that surprised even himself. He was scheduled for a crucial meeting with potential investors, the kind of meeting that usually took precedence over everything else in his life. But as he looked at his calendar and saw Oliver's school schedule marked in the corner, something shifted inside him. "Cancel the meeting," he told his assistant. She stared at him. "Sir, this meeting has been scheduled for 6 weeks. Reschedule it. I need to be a father for once." The words felt strange in his mouth, unfamiliar, but also right somehow. Rowan appeared in his doorway within minutes, his expression tight with frustration. "You're canceling the biggest pitch of the quarter? I have priorities, Rowan." "Since when?" Rowan's tone was sharp. "Elias, what's going on with you? You've been distracted for weeks." "My son is struggling at school. I need to be there." "You have staff for that. You pay people to handle these things so you can focus on building this company." Elias stood, pulling on his jacket. "Maybe that's been the problem. Maybe I've been paying people to live my life while I hide in this office. Rowan watched him with cold, calculating eyes. Don't do anything foolish, Elias. We're at a critical point. But Elias was already walking out the door. He arrived home in the early afternoon, something he hadn't done in years. The mansion felt different during the day, less like a museum and more like a place where people actually lived. He heard voices coming from somewhere upstairs and followed the sound. As he climbed the stairs, he heard Oliver laughing. Actually laughing. The sound stopped Elias in his tracks. When was the last time he'd heard his son laugh like that? Free and unguarded and joyful? He moved quietly down the hall toward Oliver's study room. The door was slightly ajar, and through it, Elias could see Oliver sitting at his desk, completely absorbed in whatever was on the page in front of him. Nia stood at the small whiteboard on the wall, explaining something with animated gestures. Elias started to push the door open, then froze as he heard what Nia was saying. So when we talk about limits in mathematics, we're really talking about what happens when we get very, very close to something without actually touching it. Imagine you're walking toward a wall, but with each step, you only cover half the remaining distance. You'll get closer and closer, but you'll never actually reach it. That's what a limit is. Limits? Elias felt confusion ripple through him. That was calculus, advanced mathematics. Why on earth would she be teaching that to a 9-year-old? Oliver's voice piped up, full of curiosity. But what if I took really, really tiny steps? Would I eventually touch the wall? In the real world, yes, because you'd eventually take a step smaller than an atom, and then physics gets weird. Nia laughed. But in pure mathematics, in the world of theory, you could keep halving forever. The limit exists even if you never quite reach it. Elias watched his son nod slowly, processing this concept that most adults would struggle with. And somehow, impossibly, Oliver seemed to understand it. Not fully, perhaps, but enough to ask intelligent follow-up questions. Nia suddenly turned, as if sensing someone's presence. Her eyes met Elias's, and panic flashed across her face. She immediately erased the whiteboard and switched her tone completely. Anyway, that's way too complicated for us right now. Let's go back to your regular homework, okay? She gestured to a worksheet on the desk, her movements quick and nervous. Elias stood in the doorway, not sure what to say. Oliver had noticed him too, and was watching with a mixture of anxiety and guilt, as if they'd been caught doing something wrong. I came home early, Elias said finally. I thought we could spend some time together. That's great, Dad, Oliver said, but his voice was cautious. Nia gathered her cleaning supplies, clearly preparing to leave them alone. I should get back to my regular work. Miss Nia was helping me with homework, Oliver added quickly, defensively. That's all. Elias nodded slowly, but his mind was racing. The equation he'd glimpsed on the whiteboard before Nia erased it was far beyond anything he'd expect to see in elementary school. And the way she'd explained that concept, the confidence and precision in her teaching, suggested deep knowledge. After Nia left, Elias sat with Oliver for a while, trying to make conversation about school. But his mind kept drifting back to what he'd witnessed. Something unusual was happening in his house. Something that involved his son and the quiet woman he'd hired 8 months ago without much thought. That evening, Elias found himself thinking about the nanny cam he'd installed in the study when Oliver was younger. He'd never really checked it, hadn't seen the need. But now curiosity gnawed at him. What else had he missed while buried in his work? He pulled up the footage on his laptop and began scrolling through the last few weeks. At first, he saw normal scenes. Nia helping Oliver with basic homework, reading to him, bringing him snacks. Then he started fast-forwarding to the early morning hours when he was always at the office already. His cursor stopped. Rewind. Play. There, on the screen, Nia stood at Oliver's whiteboard, writing complex mathematical equations. Her handwriting was precise and confident. She drew diagrams illustrating concepts that Elias vaguely remembered from his own university days. And Oliver sat watching her, completely engaged, asking questions that showed real understanding. Elias leaned back in his chair, his mind spinning. Who was Nia Carter? How did a woman working as a housekeeper have the knowledge to teach university-level mathematics? And why was she hiding it? He didn't confront her that night. Instead, he watched more footage, piecing together a picture of secret morning lessons that had been happening right under his nose. Nia was teaching his son, really teaching him, in ways that clearly resonated with Oliver's mind. The next day at school, something remarkable happened. During math class, the teacher posed a challenge problem that she admitted was above grade level, something to stretch the advanced students. Oliver stared at it for a long moment, then raised his hand for the first time in weeks. "Yes, Oliver." The teacher's voice was surprised. "I think I know how to solve it." Oliver's voice was quiet but steady. The entire class turned to look at him. Oliver walked to the front of the room and picked up the chalk. His hand trembled slightly, but he began working through the problem step by step, just the way Nia had taught him, breaking it into smaller pieces, finding the patterns, building the solution like stacking blocks. When he finished, the teacher stared at the board in shock. That's exactly right, Oliver. That's excellent work." Oliver returned to his seat, his cheeks flushed with pride. Several classmates whispered to each other, confused by this sudden transformation. Principal Gaines, who'd been observing the class, made a note in her folder. Sudden improvement. Very sudden. That afternoon, Nia received something that made her blood run cold. An envelope tucked into her mailbox, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a university crest embossed at the top. The crest she'd once been so proud to represent. Below it, a message in typed letters. "We know where you are." Nia's hands shook as she read the words. No signature, no explanation. Just that simple, terrible statement. They'd found her. After 3 years of hiding, of keeping herself invisible and insignificant, someone had tracked her down. She carried the letter to the kitchen and held it over the sink, using a lighter to set the corner aflame. As the paper curled and blackened, memories flooded back. The threats, the accusations, the fear that had driven her from her old life into this hidden existence. When only ashes remained, Nia washed them down the drain and gripped the edge of the sink, forcing herself to breathe. Oliver needed her. She couldn't disappear now, not when he was finally beginning to believe in himself. But staying meant risking everything. She didn't notice Elias standing in the hallway, watching her burn the letter. His expression was troubled and curious in equal measure. That night, Elias made a phone call to a private investigator he'd used for business matters in the past. "I need you to look into someone, Nia Carter. She works for me. I want to know everything. Where she came from, what she did before I hired her, why a woman with her obvious intelligence is working as domestic help." The investigator promised results within 48 hours. As Elias ended the call, he felt a strange mixture of guilt and determination. Nia was hiding something significant, something that involved not just her past but possibly Oliver's future. He needed to know the truth, even if that truth made everything more complicated than he was prepared to handle. In her small room off the kitchen, Nia lay awake staring at the ceiling. Oliver's joyful face floated in her mind, the way he'd looked when he finally understood that he wasn't stupid, just different. She thought about the letter, the threat, the people who wanted her to stay silent and invisible forever. She'd made a choice 3 years ago to disappear rather than fight, to survive rather than thrive. But now there was a child involved, a brilliant, struggling child who needed someone to believe in him. The equation had changed. The variables had shifted. Nia closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness, "I can't run anymore." Outside, the mansion settled into silence. But inside its walls, questions multiplied like mathematical progressions, each answer leading to 3 more unknowns. The careful distance Elias had maintained from his household staff was crumbling. The protective walls Nia had built around her past were beginning to crack. And Oliver, caught in the middle, was blossoming into someone neither of them had expected. Everything was about to change. The private investigator's report arrived 2 days later in a thick manila envelope. Elias sat alone in his study, the house quiet around him as he opened it and began to read. With each page, his understanding of Nia Carter shifted and deepened in ways he hadn't anticipated. Nia hadn't just attended college. She'd been accepted into one of the country's most prestigious mathematics doctoral programs at age 20. Her undergraduate thesis on algorithmic pattern recognition had been published in a peer-reviewed journal, something almost unheard of for someone so young. She'd presented at conferences alongside professors with decades of experience. Her advisor, Dr. Marcus Webb, had called her a once-in-a-generation talent. Then at 22, she'd published a groundbreaking paper on encryption mathematics. The academic world had taken notice. Job offers from tech companies, speaking invitations, a clear path to becoming one of the youngest tenured professors in her field. And then, nothing. Dr. Webb died suddenly in a car accident that was ruled suspicious but never fully investigated. 6 weeks later, Nia withdrew from her program. No forwarding address, no explanation. Her name disappeared from academic publications, conference rosters, university directories. For 3 years, there was simply no record of Nia Carter existing anywhere in the professional world. Until she applied for a housekeeping position at the Hawthorne mansion 8 months ago, using only a high school diploma on her resume. Elias set down the report and stared at the wall. A woman with a mind brilliant enough to reshape entire fields of study was scrubbing his floors and doing his laundry. The waste of it, the tragedy of whatever had driven her into hiding, made something ache in his chest. He knew he needed to confront her, but carefully. Nia had buried her past for a reason, and that reason had likely involved fear. He wouldn't bulldoze through her defenses. He'd approach gently, the way she approached Oliver when helping him with difficult problems. The opportunity came that evening when Oliver was upstairs reading. Elias found Nia in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up when he entered, and he saw a flicker of wariness cross her face. "Nia, can we talk for a moment?" He kept his voice casual, non-threatening. "Of course, Mr. Hawthorne." She wiped her hands on a towel, her posture careful and controlled. "I've been curious about something." He leaned against the counter, trying to appear relaxed, despite the tension he felt. "Where did you study? Before you came to work here?" Nia's expression didn't change, but Elias noticed her hands stilled for just a fraction of a second. "Just a small college, nothing special." "What did you study?" "General studies, mostly." Her voice remained steady, but she wasn't meeting his eyes now. "A little bit of everything." Elias knew she was lying, but he didn't press. "Not yet. You seem to have a real gift for teaching. The way you explain things to Oliver, it's remarkable." Now she did look at him, searching his face for hidden meaning. "He's a smart boy. He just needs someone to be patient with him. He's lucky to have you." Elias meant it sincerely, and something in his tone must have conveyed that because Nia's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you, sir." He wanted to tell her he knew everything, that she didn't need to hide anymore, that whatever she was running from might not matter as much as she feared. But the words stuck in his throat. Trust had to be earned, and he'd done nothing yet to earn hers. The next morning, Elias did something he hadn't done in over a year. He woke early and stayed home, positioning himself quietly outside Oliver's study where the morning lessons happened. He felt slightly foolish, spying on his own household, but he needed to see this properly with his own eyes. Through the partially open door, he watched Nia teach Oliver about fractals using nothing but paper and colored pencils. She drew a triangle, then showed Oliver how to create smaller triangles within it, following a specific pattern that repeated endlessly at every scale. "Nature is full of fractals," Nia explained, her voice animated with genuine enthusiasm. "Snowflakes, tree branches, coastlines, even broccoli. The same pattern repeating at different sizes, creating infinite complexity from simple rules." Oliver stared at his drawing in wonder. "So if I kept going forever, each tiny triangle would have the same shape as the big one?" "Exactly. That's self-similarity. It's one of the most beautiful concepts in mathematics because it shows how something simple can create something infinitely complex." She smiled at him. "Kinda like how small acts of kindness can ripple out and create big changes in the world." Elias felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just teaching. This was sharing a genuine love of knowledge, connecting abstract concepts to the real world in ways that made them meaningful. Nia wasn't just helping Oliver pass tests. She was showing him how to see beauty in patterns, how to think about the world mathematically. When the lesson ended, Oliver hugged Nia tightly. "You make everything make sense, Miss Nia." She hugged him back, and Elias saw her blink rapidly, fighting tears. "You make sense, Oliver. You always did. The world just wasn't speaking your language before." After Oliver left for school, Elias remained in the hallway, processing what he'd witnessed. His son had been drowning, and Nia had quietly, secretly, pulled him to safety. Not for recognition or reward, but simply because she couldn't watch a child struggle when she had the ability to help. That afternoon, Oliver came home from school practically vibrating with excitement. He found Nia in the laundry room and launched himself at her with news. Miss Nia, Mr. Patterson gave us a challenge problem today, and I solved it. He said my solution was creative and elegant." Oliver's words tumbled over each other. "And Sarah, you know Sarah who sits next to me? She asked me to help her with her homework. She asked me because she thought I was good at math." Nia laughed and spun him around. "I'm so proud of you. See what happens when you trust yourself. I couldn't have done it without you." Oliver's voice grew more serious. "You helped me see that I'm not stupid, that my brain just works differently." "Your brain works beautifully," Nia assured him. Elias, passing by in the hallway, heard this exchange and felt a wave of complex emotions. Pride in his son's achievement, gratitude toward Nia for making it possible, and guilt, sharp and painful, because he should have been the one to help Oliver see his own worth. He paused at the doorway. Oliver saw him, and his excitement dimmed slightly, becoming more cautious. That hurt too, the way his son's joy automatically muted in his presence. "Dad, I solved a really hard problem at school today," Oliver said, his voice more subdued now. "I heard." Elias stepped into the room. "I'm proud of you, Oliver." "Really?" The hope in Oliver's eyes was almost too much to bear. "Really?" Elias knelt down to his son's eye level, something he couldn't remember doing in years. "I know I haven't been around much. I know I've missed a lot. But I see you, Oliver. I see how hard you're working." Oliver threw his arms around Elias's neck, and Elias held his son close, feeling the small body trembling slightly. How long had Oliver needed to hear those words? How long had Elias withheld them while buried in his work? Over Oliver's shoulder, Elias met Nia's eyes. She was smiling, but there were tears on her cheeks. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Later that evening, Oliver shyly approached Elias in the study with a piece of paper. "I made something for you." Elias took it carefully. It was a drawing of a fractal pattern, the same one Nia had taught him that morning. But Oliver had colored it in elaborate detail, creating a beautiful geometric design that spiraled inward infinitely. "Miss Nia taught me about fractals," Oliver explained. She said they show how small things can become big things. I thought maybe it could remind you that small changes add up to big ones. Elias stared at the drawing, feeling something crack open inside his chest. His son had just offered him a profound gift, a visual metaphor for their relationship wrapped in mathematical beauty. "It's incredible, Oliver. I'll hang it right here in my study." Oliver beamed. As he left the room, Elias carefully placed the drawing in a frame and hung it where he could see it from his desk. For the first time in years, he felt connected to his son, and he had Nia Carter to thank for building that bridge. But even as gratitude filled him, questions remained. Who had driven Nia into hiding? What had she done or seen or known that made her disappear? And how could he protect her and Oliver from whatever threat still lurked in her past? That night, Rowan Pierce made an unexpected visit to the mansion. Elias was surprised to see him at the door, unannounced and agitated. "We need to talk," Rowan said, brushing past him into the foyer. "About what?" Elias followed him into the study. "About your household staff." Rowan's voice was tight. "Specifically, your maid." Elias felt his defenses rise immediately. "What about her?" "I saw your son today, in the lobby when I came by earlier. He was solving puzzles on his tablet, advanced mathematical puzzles, way beyond what a 9-year-old should handle." Rowan's eyes were sharp and calculating. "Sir, someone's teaching him. Someone with serious expertise." "I hired a tutor." Elias lied smoothly. "Don't insult my intelligence." Rowan leaned forward. "I know you well enough to know you'd have told me about hiring someone expensive. This is something else." Before Elias could respond, Nia appeared in the doorway with a tray of coffee. She froze when she saw Rowan, her face going pale. The tray trembled in her hands. Rowan stared at her, his expression shifting from irritation to shock to something darker. Recognition. "You," he breathed. Nia set the tray down with shaking hands and turned to leave, but Rowan's voice stopped her. "Nia Carter, or should I say Dr. Carter? It's been a long time." The air in the room turned electric with tension. Elias looked between them, understanding dawning. "You know each other?" Nia said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. Rowan's face twisted into something ugly. "She didn't tell you? About what she did? About the research she stole?" "I didn't steal anything," Nia said quietly, but with steel in her voice. "You tried to steal from me." "Is someone going to explain what's happening here?" Elias demanded, but Rowan was already moving toward the door. "Be careful, Elias. Very careful. That woman is dangerous." He shot Nia a look filled with venom. "We're not done." After he left, silence fell heavy in the study. Nia stood rigid, her hands clenched at her sides. Elias could see she was fighting to maintain composure. "Tell me," he said gently. "Please. Whatever history you have with Rowan, I need to know." Nia closed her eyes. "He came to the university 5 years ago. He wanted my research on encryption algorithms, the mathematics that could break security systems. He offered money, lots of it, but I knew what he wanted to use it for. Corporate espionage, stealing trade secrets. I refused. And then my advisor died. The police said it was an accident, but I knew better. 2 weeks later, someone broke into my apartment, stole my research notes. I got threatening letters, calls in the middle of the night. Rowan made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't hand over my work, I'd end up like Dr. Webb." "So you ran." Elias understood now, the full picture coming into focus. "I ran," Nia confirmed, her voice breaking slightly. "I changed my name legally, erased my digital footprint, took jobs that required no references or background checks. I've been hiding for 3 years, Mr. Hawthorne, and now he knows where I am." Elias moved toward her, then stopped, respecting her space. "Nia, you should have told me." "Why? So you could fire me? Send me away to protect yourself?" She laughed bitterly. I know how this works. I'm expendable. You're not, Elias said firmly. You're not expendable. Not to Oliver and not to me. Rowan doesn't get to threaten you. Not while you're under my roof. Nia looked at him with wide eyes, searching his face for any sign of deception. Why would you protect me? You barely know me. Because you saved my son, Elias said simply. Because you saw a struggling child and helped him, expecting nothing in return. Because you're brilliant and kind, and the world needs more people like you, not fewer. He paused. And because Rowan Pierce is a lot of things. But he's not someone who gets to destroy good people without consequences. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Nia whispered, "Thank you." But even as relief washed over her face, both of them knew this wasn't over. Rowan had found her. He knew where she was, what she was doing, and that she mattered to Elias. That knowledge made her a target in ways she hadn't been before. 3 days later, everything changed. Elias sat in the conference room of his downtown office, surrounded by investors eager to hear his pitch for the company's latest security protocol. Rowan sat at the opposite end of the table, his expression unreadable but his tension palpable. Halfway through the presentation, Elias stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the charts and graphs projected on the screen, at the eager faces of people who wanted to give him millions of dollars, at Rowan who was watching him with calculated intensity. And he thought about Oliver, home with Nia, probably working through morning lessons that filled his son with joy and confidence. He thought about the fractal drawing hanging in his study. He thought about how much of Oliver's life he'd already missed while chasing numbers and deals and approval from people who didn't actually matter. "I'm sorry," Elias said abruptly. "I need to reschedule this meeting." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Rowan stood, his face flushed with anger. "Elias, what are you doing?" "Something I should have done a long time ago. Putting my family first." He gathered his papers and headed for the door. "My assistant will contact you all to reschedule. Thank you for your patience." Rowan followed him into the hallway, grabbing his arm. "Have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea how important that meeting was?" "I know exactly how important it was. And I also know my son is more important." Elias pulled his arm free. "My priorities have changed, Rowan." "Because of her," Rowan hissed. "That woman has gotten into your head. She's manipulating you through your son. She's helping him. There's a difference." "Is there?" Rowan's eyes were cold. "Wake up, Elias. She's using Oliver to secure her position, to gain your trust. When are you going to see that?" But Elias was already walking away, pulling out his phone to call his driver. He didn't know what he'd find when he got home. He just knew he needed to be there, to see his son, to be present in a way he hadn't been in far too long. The drive home felt endless. Elias stared out the window at the city passing by, his mind racing with thoughts of Oliver and Nia and the complicated situation he'd somehow found himself in. When had his life become about protecting a brilliant woman hiding from his business partner? When had his cold, empty mansion started feeling like a place he actually wanted to be? As his car pulled into the circular driveway, Elias heard something that stopped him cold. Laughter. Real, unrestrained, joyful laughter. He followed the sound through the foyer and down the hall toward Oliver's study. The door was partially open, and through it, Elias could see his son standing at the whiteboard, marker in hand, explaining something with animated gestures. Nia sat at the desk, watching with an expression of pure delight and pride. "So if we take the limit as x approaches infinity," Oliver was saying, his voice confident in a way Elias had never heard before, "the function approaches 0 because the denominator grows faster than the numerator." Elias pushed the door open wider, and it creaked. Both Nia and Oliver turned, startled. Oliver's eyes went wide with surprise and a flash of fear. The marker slipped from his hand. Elias stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the whiteboard covered in calculus equations. At his 9-year-old son, who'd just explained a limit proof with the confidence of a college student. At Nia, whose expression had shifted from joy to panic in the span of a heartbeat. His keys fell from his hand, clattering loudly on the floor. "Dad?" Oliver's voice was small and uncertain. "What are you doing home?" Elias couldn't speak. He couldn't process what he was seeing. He'd known intellectually that Nia was teaching Oliver advanced concepts. He'd seen it on the security footage, read about it in reports. But witnessing it in person, seeing his young son confidently working through university-level mathematics, was something else entirely. Oliver rushed forward, his face bright with pride, despite his nervousness. "Dad, look, I solved it. Miss Nia taught me about limits and derivatives, and I actually understand it." Nia stood slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Hawthorne, I can explain." "How long?" Elias found his voice finally, though it came out hoarse. "How long have you been teaching him like this?" "Since you caught us that first time," Nia said quietly. "I know I should have asked permission, but Oliver was struggling so much and I couldn't just watch him fail when I knew I could help." "She's really good at explaining things," Oliver added, moving protectively closer to Nia. "She makes it all make sense. Dad, I'm not failing anymore. I got an A on my last test." "An A!" The pride in his son's voice broke through Elias's shock. Oliver was happy. More than happy. He was thriving. The anxious, withdrawn child who'd barely spoken at dinner had transformed into this confident young person, explaining calculus at the whiteboard. Elias should be grateful. He was grateful. But he was also overwhelmed by the weight of how much he'd missed, how much he'd failed to see. Nia misread his silence. "I'm sorry, sir. I overstepped. If you want me to stop, to leave—" "No." The word came out sharper than Elias intended. He took a breath, softening his tone. "No, that's not what I want." "It's not?" Nia and Oliver spoke in unison, both looking equally surprised. Elias stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. He walked to the whiteboard and studied the equations there. They were neat, precisely written, with small notes in the margins explaining key concepts. "This is remarkable," he said finally, turning to face them both. "Oliver, I had no idea you were capable of this level of work." "I didn't either," Oliver admitted, "until Miss Nia showed me that I could do it, that my brain wasn't broken, just different." Elias felt a sharp stab of guilt. How long had his son believed he was broken? How many nights had Oliver cried himself to sleep, thinking he was stupid, while Elias had been at the office working on deals that suddenly seemed monumentarily insignificant? He knelt down to Oliver's level, the way he'd done a few days earlier. "Your brain isn't broken, Oliver. It never was. I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. I'm sorry I wasn't here to help you." Oliver's eyes filled with tears. "You're here now." "I am. And I want to understand what you're learning." Elias looked up at Nia. "Both of you. I want to know how you did this, how you helped him go from failing to understanding calculus in a matter of weeks." Nia looked uncertain. "Mr. Hawthorne." "Elias," he corrected. "Please. Mr. Hawthorne is too formal for someone who's given my son his confidence back." A tentative smile crossed Nia's face. It wasn't hard, honestly. Oliver is genuinely gifted. He just needs concepts explained visually and metaphorically rather than abstractly. Once I understood how his mind works, the rest was just patience and practice. "She makes hard things easy," Oliver added, "and she never makes me feel stupid when I don't get something right away." Elias felt emotion tightening his throat. I want you to continue teaching him. Officially. Not as a secret, not as something you do in stolen morning hours. As his actual tutor. He paused. What would you need? Materials? Resources? I don't need anything fancy, Nia said slowly. Just time with him and the freedom to teach the way that works for his mind. You have it. Whatever you need, it's yours. Elias stood, then hesitated. There's something else. I know about your past, about the research, about Dr. Webb, about Rowan. Nia's face went pale. How much do you know? Everything. I hired an investigator. He saw her flinch and quickly added, I'm not telling you this to threaten you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that I understand why you've been hiding. And because I want you to know that you don't have to hide anymore. Not here, not from me. Rowan knows where I am, Nia said, her voice barely above a whisper. He'll come after me. He'll have to go through me first. Elias's voice was firm. And I promise you, Nia, I won't let that happen. Oliver grabbed both their hands, forming a small circle in the study. We're a team now, right? We protect each other. Nia looked down at Oliver, then up at Elias. Something shifted in her expression, the constant wariness that had been there since the day she'd started working for him finally easing. Yes, she said softly. We're a team. Elias's phone buzzed in his pocket, shattering the moment. He pulled it out and felt his stomach drop when he saw the message from Rowan. We need to talk about your maid. Immediately. Nia saw his expression change. It's him, isn't it? Yes. Elias showed her the message. What does he want? Oliver asked, his voice worried. Nothing good, Elias said grimly. He typed back a quick response. There's nothing to discuss. Within seconds, another message appeared. Then you leave me no choice. Elias stared at the words, feeling the threat embedded in them. Rowan had found Nia. He'd recognized her, and now he was making his move, whatever that might be. We need to be careful, Elias said, looking at Nia. Rowan doesn't make empty threats. I know, Nia said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I've known that for a long time. Oliver squeezed both their hands tighter. But we're together now. That makes us stronger, right? Elias met Nia's eyes over his son's head and saw his own determination reflected back at him. Right, he said firmly. Together we're stronger. But even as he spoke the words, Elias knew the real battle was just beginning. Rowan had power, connections, and resources. More than that, he had secrets about Nia's past that could be weaponized. The question was whether Elias's wealth and influence would be enough to protect the woman who'd saved his son, or whether Rowan's threats would tear apart the fragile new family forming in the Hawthorne mansion. The whiteboard full of equations seemed to glow in the afternoon light, a testament to knowledge shared and bonds forged. But shadows were gathering outside, and Elias knew that the peaceful moment couldn't last. The war for Oliver's future and Nia's freedom was about to escalate in ways none of them were fully prepared for. The threatening message from Rowan hung in the air like poison. Elias stood in Oliver's study, his phone still clutched in his hand, while Nia's face had gone deathly pale. Oliver sensed the tension and pressed closer to Nia's side, his earlier joy evaporating into fear. Before anyone could speak, Elias's phone rang. Rowan's name flashed on the screen. Elias answered, putting it on speaker so Nia could hear. Meet me tonight. Rowan's voice was low and tense, each word clipped and controlled. 9 o'clock. The Old Harbor restaurant on 5th. No staff, no cameras. Come alone. Or this gets much worse for everyone. Rowan, whatever you're planning. 9 o'clock, Elias. Don't be late. The line went dead. Elias looked at Nia, whose hands were trembling. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold the pieces together. He's never sounded scared before, she whispered, but that was fear in his voice. When Rowan is scared, he's at his most dangerous. What does he want with you? Oliver asked, his voice small and frightened. Why is he being mean to Miss Nia? Elias knelt beside his son, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes adults make mistakes and hurt people to protect themselves. Mr. Pierce made some bad choices a long time ago, and he's worried those choices might catch up with him. Because of Miss Nia's research, Oliver was perceptive, more so than Elias had given him credit for. Yes, Nia said softly, because I wouldn't help him do something wrong, and now he sees me as a threat. Oliver grabbed Nia's hand fiercely. Are they taking you away? The question hit Nia like a physical blow. She dropped to her knees and pulled Oliver into a tight embrace. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. I promise you that. No matter what happens, I will fight to stay with you. Over Oliver's shoulder, Nia's eyes met Elias's. He saw the fear there, the barely contained terror of someone who'd been running for years and had finally been cornered. But he also saw determination and a fierce protectiveness toward his son that matched his own. I have to go meet him, Elias said quietly. I need to know what he wants, what he's planning. No, Nia's voice was sharp. Please, Elias, don't go. Rowan is manipulative and ruthless. He'll twist everything, make you doubt me, make you think I'm the danger instead of him. I'm not going to doubt you. Elias meant it. But I need to hear what he has to say. Knowledge is power, and right now, we need every advantage we can get. Nia released Oliver and stood, her expression conflicted. Then at least be careful. Rowan doesn't make threats lightly. If he's calling a meeting like this, he has something planned, something big. As evening fell, Elias prepared to leave. He found Oliver on the stairs, sitting with his arms wrapped around his knees, looking small and vulnerable again. The confident boy who'd been explaining calculus had disappeared, replaced by the anxious child Elias remembered from before Nia's arrival. Hey, Elias sat down beside him. Talk to me. I don't want her to go away, Oliver said, his voice breaking. She's the only one who understands me. She makes me feel smart. She makes me feel like I matter. The words cut deep. Elias pulled his son close. You've always mattered, Oliver. I'm sorry I didn't show you that better. I'm sorry I let work become more important than being your father. Are you going to fire her? Oliver looked up with red-rimmed eyes. No, never. I'm going to protect her, just like she's been protecting you. Elias kissed the top of Oliver's head. That's what families do. They protect each other. Is she family now? The question caught Elias off guard. He thought about Nia's gentle teaching, her fierce love for Oliver, the way she'd risked exposure to help a struggling child. Yes, he said finally. I think she is. The harbor restaurant was nearly empty when Elias arrived. The old building sat on the waterfront, its windows overlooking dark water that reflected the city lights in fractured patterns. Rowan sat alone at a corner table, a folder resting in front of him. Elias slid into the seat across from him. You wanted to talk. So talk. Rowan's smile was cold and calculated. Always straight to business. That's what I've always admired about you, Elias. He pushed the folder across the table. But first, you need to see this. Inside were newspaper clippings, printed emails, and several glossy photographs. Elias saw images of Nia at academic conferences, younger and smiling, standing beside an older man with kind eyes, Dr. Marcus Webb, presumably. Other photos showed Nia at a chalkboard covered in complex equations, surrounded by rapt students. She was brilliant, Rowan said, his voice almost wistful. The kind of mind that comes along once in a generation. Her work on encryption mathematics could have revolutionized data security. It still could. Or break it entirely, Elias said, understanding dawning. That's what you wanted. Not to protect information, but to steal it. I wanted to leverage an opportunity. Rowan's voice hardened. I offered her millions, a chance to change the world and get wealthy doing it. But she was idealistic, naive. She refused. So you threatened her. It wasn't a question. I tried to make her see reason. Rowan leaned forward, his eyes glittering with barely contained anger. When that didn't work, I approached her advisor. Dr. Webb was more practical. He understood that money talks. He agreed to hand over Nia's research notes. And then he died. Elias felt disgust rising in his throat. An unfortunate accident. Rowan's expression revealed nothing. Tragic, really. But these things happen. Shortly after, someone broke into Nia's apartment. Her research disappeared, all of it. Every note, every formula, every brilliant insight she'd spent years developing. You stole it. I acquired it, Rowan corrected. But here's the problem, Elias. The notes were incomplete. Nia kept the crucial elements in her head, the final pieces that would make the whole system functional. Without her cooperation, all I have is worthless scribbles on paper. Understanding crashed over Elias like a wave. That's why you've been looking for her, not for revenge, but because you need her to finish what she started. She ruined a billion-dollar opportunity. Rowan's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. And now she's hiding in your house, teaching your son, making herself indispensable to your family. Don't you see what she's doing? She's manipulating you through Oliver, securing her position, using that child as a shield. She's helping him, Elias said firmly. Oliver was failing, withdrawn, miserable. Now he's thriving. That's not manipulation. That's kindness. Rowan slid another document across the table. This one was a threatening letter. The paper yellowed with age. She received this 3 years ago, shortly after Dr. Webb's death. It warned her to disappear, to stop publishing, to stop being brilliant. Otherwise, she'd end up like her mentor. You wrote this. The disgust in Elias's voice was palpable. I did what was necessary to protect my investment. Rowan's eyes were cold. But now she's resurfaced. She's teaching again, even if it's just one student. She's using her gift, and that means she's vulnerable. If she continues teaching Oliver, she'll be found. And when they find her, Elias, they'll find you. Who are they? Elias demanded. Rowan smiled, and it was the most chilling expression Elias had ever seen. The investors who put money into acquiring her research. The people who don't like loose ends. The ones who make problems disappear permanently. He paused, letting the threat sink in. If she continues teaching Oliver, she'll put that boy in danger. Is that what you want? Elias felt his blood run cold. The threat wasn't just against Nia anymore. Rowan was implying that Oliver could become collateral damage. You're lying. You're trying to scare me into firing her. I'm giving you a choice, Rowan said, standing. Fire her. Send her away before it's too late. Or risk everything. Your company, your reputation, your son's safety. Because you're too proud to admit you've been played. He left the folder on the table and walked away, leaving Elias alone with documents that told a story of brilliance, betrayal, and danger. But sitting in that empty restaurant, Elias realized something crucial. Rowan's threats revealed his weakness. He was desperate. He needed Nia's knowledge, and he was terrified that Elias would protect her, which meant Elias had power in this situation, more than Rowan wanted him to realize. When Elias returned home, he found Nia pacing the living room, unable to sit still. She looked up as he entered, her face etched with worry. What did he say? Elias set the folder on the coffee table. He told me you're dangerous, that you're manipulating me through Oliver, that continuing to teach him will put us all at risk. Nia's face crumbled. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should leave before... He's terrified of you, Elias interrupted. Everything he said, every threat he made, it all comes from fear. You have something he needs and he can't control you anymore. That makes you powerful, Nia. Not dangerous, powerful. Nia stared at him, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. You're not sending me away? Never. Elias moved closer, his voice intense. You didn't just teach Oliver math. You taught me how to see my son, really see him. You showed me what I'd been missing while I was buried in work and numbers and meaningless deals. You gave me my family back, Nia. I'm not letting Rowan take that away. Tears spilled down Nia's cheeks. He threatened Oliver, didn't he? That's what he does. He finds what you love and uses it as leverage. Then we protect what we love. Elias gently wiped away her tears. Together. You're not alone in this anymore. From the doorway, a small voice interrupted. Miss Nia? Oliver stood there in his pajamas, his stuffed dog clutched under his arm. Are you crying because of me? Nia immediately went to him, kneeling down. No, sweetheart. These are happy tears. Your dad just told me I get to keep teaching you, that I get to stay. Oliver threw his arms around her neck and Nia held him close, her body shaking with relief and fear, and a fierce love for this child who'd somehow become hers to protect. Elias watched them together and felt his resolve crystallize into steel. Rowan wanted a war. He'd get one. But he'd chosen the wrong family to threaten. The attack came faster than any of them expected. The next morning, Elias was barely in his office when his assistant rushed in, her face pale with shock. Sir, Dr. Pierce is downstairs. With security. He's demanding access to the building. What? Elias stood quickly. He has access. Why would security stop him? He's not alone. There are police with him. Elias's stomach dropped. He rushed to the elevator and descended to the lobby, where he found Rowan standing with 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a severe business suit carrying a briefcase. Elias, Rowan said smoothly, I tried to warn you. I gave you a chance to handle this quietly. What is this? Elias demanded. The woman stepped forward. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm Margaret Cross, attorney representing Dr. Pierce. My client has filed a formal complaint regarding Nia Carter, currently employed in your household. He's accusing her of theft of intellectual property, corporate espionage, and endangering your family. That's absurd, Elias said, but his mind was racing. Rowan was making this public, turning it into a legal matter that couldn't be swept aside quietly. Ms. Carter has been living under false pretenses, Rowan said, his voice carrying across the lobby. Several employees had stopped to watch. She's a fugitive from academic fraud charges. She stole research from the university, caused the death of her advisor through negligence, and is now using your son to hide from the consequences of her actions. Every word of that is a lie, Elias said, his voice low and dangerous. Then she should have no problem answering questions in court. The attorney handed Elias a document. This is a restraining order. Ms. Carter is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of your residence or having any contact with your minor child, pending investigation into these allegations. Elias stared at the paper, feeling the world tilt beneath him. You can't do this. We just did, Rowan said, and there was triumph in his eyes. For Oliver's safety, of course. No parent would want their child exposed to someone potentially dangerous. Back at the mansion, Nia was helping Oliver with his morning lesson when Elias's car screeched into the driveway much too fast. She knew immediately that something was wrong. Elias burst through the door, his face ashen, holding papers in a clenched fist. You need to leave, he said without preamble. Right now. Rowan filed a restraining order. If you're here when they come to serve it, they'll arrest you. What? Nia felt the blood drain from her face. No, this can't be happening. Oliver appeared in the hallway, sensing the panic. What's going on? Why does Miss Nia have to leave? Nia looked at the boy she'd come to love like her own child. His face was confused and frightened, his small hands gripping his stuffed dog so tightly His knuckles were white. "Oliver, I need you to be brave for me, okay? Something bad is happening, and I have to go away for a little while." "No!" Oliver's scream echoed through the mansion. He ran to Nia and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You can't leave. You promised. You said you wouldn't go unless I told you to, and I'm not telling you to." Nia dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I know, baby. I know. But sometimes promises get broken by people who don't care about what's right. Then I'll come with you." Oliver was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. "I don't want to be here without you. I'll fail again. I'll be stupid again. Please don't leave me." Elias felt his heart shatter as he watched his son beg the woman who'd saved him not to abandon him. This was exactly what Rowan wanted: to destroy the bond that had formed between them, to prove his power by tearing apart what Elias was trying to build. "Oliver," Elias said gently, pulling his son away from Nia even as the boy fought against him. "Miss Nia isn't leaving because she wants to. She's leaving to keep you safe." "I don't care about safe," Oliver screamed, his voice breaking. "I care about her. She's the only one who understands me." The words struck Elias like a physical blow. Even now, after everything, Oliver still felt that Nia was the only one who truly saw him. And maybe he was right. Maybe Elias had started too late, done too little, and the connection between his son and Nia was something he could never replicate. Nia cupped Oliver's face in her hands, forcing him to look at her through their tears. "Listen to me very carefully. You are brilliant. You are kind. You are strong. And you have everything you need inside yourself to succeed. I didn't make you smart, Oliver. I just helped you see that you already were. But what if I forget?" Oliver's voice was small and broken. "You won't forget, and your father will be here to remind you." Nia looked up at Elias, her eyes pleading with him to understand the responsibility she was placing in his hands. "He sees your gift now. He'll help you." A car pulled into the driveway, a sheriff's vehicle. They were out of time. Nia grabbed a small bag she always kept, packed, a habit from her years of running. She kissed Oliver's forehead one last time. "Be brave. Be brilliant. Be you." Then she was gone, slipping out the back door seconds before the sheriff rang the front doorbell. Oliver collapsed in the foyer, sobbing uncontrollably. Elias held him, feeling helpless and furious and devastated all at once. The sheriff served the restraining order papers, his expression sympathetic but professional. "Is the individual in question on the premises?" "She's gone," Elias said coldly. "She left to spare my son the trauma of watching her be arrested." After the sheriff left, Elias carried Oliver upstairs to his room. His son had cried himself into exhaustion, his face blotchy and swollen. As Elias tucked him into bed, Oliver grabbed his hand. "Dad?" His voice was hoarse from crying. "If she goes, I go with her." The words hung in the air, a declaration of loyalty that both broke Elias's heart and filled him with a strange pride. His son had found someone worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. That was love, pure and uncomplicated. "She's not going anywhere permanently," Elias promised. "I'm going to fix this, Oliver. I'm going to bring her back." "How?" Oliver looked at him with eyes that wanted desperately to believe but had been disappointed too many times. "By fighting. By being smarter and stronger than Rowan expects. By not giving up." Elias squeezed his son's hand. "By being the father you deserve." That evening, Elias's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello? It's me." Nia's voice was shaky but controlled. "I'm at a motel across town. I wanted you to know I'm safe." "Nia, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have." "You did everything you could." Her voice was gentle. "Rowan is powerful and ruthless. This isn't your fault. Oliver asked about you every 10 minutes today. He refused to eat. He's convinced you're never coming back. Nia's breath hitched. Tell him I'm fighting to come back. Tell him to be strong. I will. Elias paused. Nia, I'm going to destroy Rowan for this. Whatever it takes, I'm going to expose what he did to you, to Dr. Webb, to everyone he's hurt. I'm going to make sure he can never threaten you again. Be careful, Nia warned. He has connections and resources. If you come at him directly, he'll crush you. Then I won't come at him directly. A plan was forming in Elias's mind, pieces clicking into place like one of Oliver's mathematical puzzles. I'll be strategic, patient. I'll use his own weapons against him. After they hung up, Elias stood in his study and looked at the fractal drawing Oliver had made, still hanging on the wall. Small changes leading to big transformations, patterns within patterns. Everything connected in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Rowan had made a crucial mistake. He'd threatened Oliver, turned this into a public legal battle. That meant evidence, witnesses, court records. All things, all that could be investigated, challenged, exposed. Elias picked up his phone and began making calls. His lawyers first, then the private investigator, then several contacts in the media who owed him favors. If Rowan wanted a war fought in public, Elias would give him one. But it would be a war Rowan didn't see coming, until it was too late. In Oliver's room, the boy lay awake staring at the ceiling. On his nightstand sat a piece of paper covered in equations Nia had taught him. He picked it up and held it close, reading her handwriting by the dim night light. Come back, he whispered into the darkness. Please come back. And somewhere across town, in a shabby motel room, Nia sat on a worn bedspread with her old notebook open in her lap. The equations she'd once loved looked different now, not like abstract beauty, but like weapons that had been used against her and the people she cared about. She thought about Oliver's face, tear-stained and desperate. She thought about Elias's promise to fight. She thought about all the years she'd spent running and hiding, letting fear dictate her choices. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to fight back. Nia pulled out her phone and began typing, not to Elias or Oliver, but to someone else. Someone from her past who might have answers about Dr. Webb's death, about Rowan's investors, about the secrets that had been buried 3 years ago. If Rowan wanted to expose her past, then she'd expose his too, and she'd start by proving that Dr. Webb's death was no accident. The battle lines had been drawn, the weapons had been chosen, and 3 people who'd become an unlikely family were about to discover just how far they'd go to protect each other. Outside Nia's motel window, a car sat in the parking lot, its occupant watching and waiting. Rowan had eyes everywhere. But what he didn't know was that Nia had stopped running, and a cornered genius with nothing left to lose was far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. 3 days after Nia's forced departure, a sheriff arrived at the mansion with another document. Oliver watched from the top of the stairs as his father accepted the papers, his face growing darker with each word he read. "What is it?" Oliver asked quietly, coming down the steps. Elias looked up at his son, who'd barely eaten or spoken since Nia left. Dark circles shadowed Oliver's eyes, and he clutched his notebook of equations like a lifeline. Nia has to appear in court. Rowan is formally accusing her of stealing intellectual property and endangering our family. But that's not true. Oliver's voice cracked. She didn't do anything wrong. I know, son, and we're going to prove it. Elias pulled Oliver close. But it means this is going to get harder before it gets better. By morning, news vans lined the street outside the Hawthorne mansion. The story had leaked to the media, sensationalized headlines screaming across every news site. Billionaire's maid, genius or con artist. Child prodigy or dangerous manipulation. Tech mogul's family torn apart by academic fraud scandal. Elias watched the circus from his study window, his jaw clenched in fury. Rowan had orchestrated this perfectly, turning Nia's brilliance into something sinister, making her look like a predator who'd infiltrated his home to exploit his vulnerable son. His phone buzzed with a call from the company's board of directors. "Elias, we need you to make a statement. Distance yourself from this woman. The scandal is affecting stock prices." "No," Elias said flatly. "Excuse me?" "I said no. Nia Carter is innocent, and I won't throw her to the wolves to protect our stock price. If the board has a problem with that, they can vote me out." He hung up before they could respond. His hands were shaking. Everything he'd built over decades was threatening to crumble. But when he thought about abandoning Nia to save his reputation, his stomach turned. Some things mattered more than money or power. At Oliver's school, things had deteriorated rapidly. Parents whispered in the hallways, pulling their children away when Oliver passed. Teachers looked at him with pity and suspicion. During lunch, he sat alone while classmates pointed and murmured. "My mom says your maid is a criminal," one boy said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She says she was probably stealing from your dad the whole time." Oliver's hands balled into fists. "She wasn't stealing anything. She was helping me." "Helping you cheat, you mean?" Another child chimed in. "That's why you suddenly got smart. She was giving you answers." "That's not true." Oliver stood, his voice rising. "She taught me how to think. She showed me I wasn't stupid." "Oliver Hawthorne, sit down," his teacher said sharply. "We don't have outbursts in this classroom." Oliver ran from the room, tears blurring his vision. He found himself in the bathroom, locked in a stall, sobbing into his hands. Everything was falling apart. The confidence Nia had given him felt like sand slipping through his fingers. When Elias picked him up early that day, Oliver was silent during the car ride home. Finally, as they pulled into the driveway, he spoke. "Everyone thinks she's bad. Everyone thinks I'm a liar." "They're wrong," Elias said firmly. "And we're going to prove it." "How?" Oliver looked at his father with desperate eyes. "How do we fight when everyone believes the lies?" "With the truth, and with people who knew the real story." Elias had been making calls all morning, tracking down former colleagues of Dr. Webb, students who'd worked with Nia, anyone who could testify to her character and Rowan's corruption. That evening, a breakthrough came. The private investigator called with news. "I found someone. Dr. Webb's sister, Catherine. She's been trying to prove her brother's death wasn't an accident for 3 years. She has documents, recordings, evidence that Rowan was pressuring her brother to steal Nia's research." Elias felt hope surge through him. "Will she testify?" "She's been waiting for someone to ask." The preliminary hearing was held in a stark courtroom that smelled of old wood and tension. Nia sat at the defendant's table with a court-appointed lawyer who looked overworked and underpaid. Across the aisle, Rowan sat with Margaret Cross and a team of expensive attorneys, their expressions confident and cold. Elias sat in the gallery with Oliver beside him. He'd fought to let Oliver attend, arguing that the boy deserved to see justice in action. Oliver gripped his father's hand so tightly it hurt. When Nia was called to the stand, she walked with her head high despite the fear Elias could see in her eyes. She looked different in professional clothes, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the academic she'd once been. "Ms. Carter," Margaret Cross began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You were once a promising mathematician, weren't you?" "I was a doctoral candidate, yes," Nia replied quietly. "And you published research on encryption algorithms, research that could be worth millions if properly developed." "My research was theoretical, academic in nature, not intended for commercial use. But Dr. Pierce offered to fund your work, didn't he? To help you develop it into something practical? He wanted to weaponize it," Nia said, her voice steady. "To use it for corporate espionage and illegal data breaches. I refused. Or did you refuse because you wanted to keep the profits for yourself? Cross's tone sharpened. Isn't it true that after Dr. Webb's death you disappeared with the only complete copy of your research? That's not what happened. Nia's hands clenched in her lap. Rowan threatened me. He had my advisor killed. He stole my research notes and then came after me when he realized they were incomplete. Objection! Cross's voice rang out. The witness is making serious accusations without evidence. Actually, a voice called from the back of the courtroom, there is evidence. Everyone turned. A woman in her 60s walked down the aisle carrying a briefcase. She had kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw. Catherine Webb. Your Honor, she said. I'm Dr. Catherine Webb, sister of the late Dr. Marcus Webb. I have recordings of phone conversations between my brother and Dr. Pierce, in which threats were made. I also have emails showing that Dr. Pierce attempted to bribe my brother into stealing Ms. Carter's research. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel for order. Rowan's face had gone white, then red with fury. Those recordings are inadmissible. They're private conversations. They're evidence of criminal conspiracy, Catherine said calmly. And I've been keeping them safe for 3 years, waiting for someone to take them seriously. The judge examined the documents Catherine presented. His expression grew graver with each page. Dr. Pierce, did you or did you not offer payment to Dr. Marcus Webb in exchange for Ms. Carter's research? Rowan stood, his composure cracking. Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. Dr. Webb and I were discussing a legitimate business arrangement. Did you threaten Ms. Carter after she refused to cooperate with your plans? I never— This is ridiculous, Rowan's voice rose. She's a con artist who manipulated her way into the Hawthorne household. She endangered a child. Oliver couldn't stay quiet any longer. He stood up in the gallery, his young voice cutting through the chaos. She saved me. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes turned to the small boy standing beside his billionaire father. Oliver, sit down, the judge said gently. No. Oliver's voice shook but held firm. Everyone keeps saying Miss Nia is bad, but she's not. She's the kindest, smartest, best person I know. I was failing school. I thought I was stupid. I cried every night because I couldn't understand anything, and everyone was disappointed in me. Tears streamed down his face. Miss Nia showed me I wasn't broken. She taught me that my brain works differently, not wrong. She made me believe in myself. How is that dangerous? How is that bad? Nia was crying openly now, her hand pressed to her mouth. Elias stood beside his son, his hand on Oliver's shoulder in support. The judge looked at Oliver for a long moment, then at Rowan, then at the evidence spread before him. I'm ordering a full investigation into Dr. Pierce's business dealings and his connection to Dr. Marcus Webb's death. As for the restraining order against Ms. Carter, it is hereby dismissed, pending the outcome of that investigation. Rowan's face twisted with rage. You can't do this. I have investors who— Are you threatening this court, Dr. Pierce? The judge's voice was steel. Rowan fell silent, but the look he shot at Nia was pure venom. As they left the courtroom, Elias pulled Nia aside while Oliver waited with Catherine. It's not over, he said quietly. Rowan will retaliate. He won't go down without a fight. I know, Nia said, but at least now people are listening. The truth is coming out. Because of Catherine. Elias glanced at the older woman who was talking kindly to Oliver. She's been carrying this weight for years. My brother believed in Nia, Catherine said, joining them. He told me she had a gift that comes once in a lifetime. He tried to protect her, and it cost him his life. I won't let his death be meaningless. Over the next week, federal investigators descended on Rowan's business operations. What they found was damning. Evidence of corporate espionage, bribery, illegal surveillance, and connections to criminal organizations that specialized in stealing trade secrets. The house of cards Rowan had built began to collapse. But he wasn't finished. Not yet. The night before the final hearing, Oliver couldn't sleep. He wandered downstairs and found his father in the study, surrounded by legal documents and case files. Elias looked exhausted, older than Oliver had ever seen him. "Dad?" Oliver stood in the doorway. "Are you scared?" Elias looked up and managed a tired smile. "A little, are you?" Oliver nodded and came to sit beside his father. "What if we lose? What if they decide Miss Nia can't come back? Then we appeal. We fight harder. We don't give up." Elias put his arm around his son. "Oliver, I need to tell you something. I'm proud of you. Not because of your grades or your math skills, but because of your courage. The way you stood up in that courtroom, the way you fought for someone you love. That takes real strength. Miss Nia taught me to be brave," Oliver said quietly. "She taught us both." Elias pulled his son close. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together, as a family." The final hearing brought a packed courtroom. Media filled every available seat, cameras set up outside. Federal prosecutors presented their evidence against Rowan. Years of illegal activity, stolen research from multiple sources, connections to organized crime. The case against him was overwhelming. When it was Nia's turn to speak, she stood and faced the judge with quiet dignity. "I didn't run away because I was guilty. I ran because I was terrified. Because powerful people threatened me and killed someone I cared about. I spent 3 years hiding, afraid to use my gifts, afraid to be myself." Her voice strengthened. "But then I met a little boy who was also hiding, who was also afraid of being himself, and I couldn't watch him suffer when I had the ability to help. Teaching Oliver wasn't about manipulation or exploitation. It was about recognizing a kindred spirit and offering him the same gift my advisor once gave me. The belief that being different is not the same as being broken." She turned to look at Oliver, who sat between Elias and Catherine. "Oliver is brilliant. He always was. He just needed someone to speak his language. I'm grateful I got to be that person, even for a little while." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss all charges against Ms. Carter. Our investigation has confirmed that she is a victim, not a perpetrator. Furthermore, we recommend that Dr. Pierce be arrested immediately on multiple federal charges." Rowan jumped to his feet. "This is a setup. They're all conspiring against me because I dared to challenge." "Dr. Pierce," the judge interrupted, "you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it." Federal agents moved toward Rowan. His expensive lawyers backed away, unwilling to go down with their client. As handcuffs were placed on his wrists, Rowan's eyes found Nia's. "You've destroyed everything I built," he hissed. "No," Nia said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just survived." As Rowan was led away, the courtroom erupted in noise. The judge banged his gavel and announced that Nia Carter was free of all charges, her record cleared, her reputation restored. Furthermore, the university that had once employed her was being directed to publicly acknowledge her contributions and formally apologize for failing to protect her. Oliver didn't wait for the formalities to finish. He broke free from his father and ran to Nia, throwing his arms around her waist. She dropped to her knees and held him close, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. "You came back," Oliver sobbed. "You really came back. I promised you I would," Nia whispered, "and I keep my promises." Elias approached them slowly, giving them their moment before joining the embrace. The three of them stood there in the middle of the courtroom, holding each other while cameras flashed and people applauded. They'd become something unexpected, a family forged not by blood but by crisis, courage, and love. 2 months later, Oliver stood nervously in the school auditorium. accepting a district mathematics award for an original project on fractal patterns in nature. He'd created a stunning visual presentation showing how the same mathematical principles that Nia had taught him appeared in everything from fern leaves to galaxy formations. In the audience, Elias sat beside Nia, watching with tears in his eyes as his son spoke confidently to a room full of people. The anxious, withdrawn child was gone, replaced by a young person who knew his worth. "I want to thank my teacher," Oliver said, his voice clear and strong. "Miss Nia believed in me when no one else did. She showed me that being smart doesn't mean being fast or getting everything right the first time. It means being curious, asking questions, and not being afraid to think differently." He paused, looking directly at her. "She saved me. Not from failing grades, but from believing I was worthless. That's what real teachers do." The applause was deafening. Nia wiped tears from her face while Elias squeezed her hand. After the ceremony, several university representatives approached Nia with offers: teaching positions, research opportunities, a chance to return to the academic world she'd been forced to leave. She listened politely, but made no commitments. Later, in the car heading home, Oliver asked, "Are you going back to teaching at a university?" Nia considered the question. "I've had a lot of offers, but I'm not sure that's what I want anymore." "What do you want?" Elias asked, his tone carefully neutral. Nia looked at both of them, this father and son who'd become her family. "I want to stay, if you'll have me. Not as a maid, obviously, but maybe as Oliver's tutor, his teacher. And maybe," she hesitated, "maybe I could work on developing programs for kids like Oliver, kids whose brains work differently, who need someone to teach them in their own language." "Yes!" Oliver shouted, bouncing in his seat. "You have to stay. We're a team, remember?" Elias pulled the car over and turned to face Nia. "I've been thinking about this. What if we established a foundation dedicated to alternative education methods for gifted children who don't fit traditional learning models? You'd run it, develop the curriculum, train other teachers. We'd provide scholarships, resources, everything needed to help kids like Oliver." Nia stared at him. "That would cost millions." "I have millions," Elias said simply, "and I can't think of a better way to spend them. You gave me my son back, Nia. Let me help you give other children what you gave Oliver, the gift of believing in themselves." Tears streamed down Nia's face. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Oliver pleaded. "Please say yes." Nia laughed through her tears. "Yes. Yes, absolutely yes." 6 months after that, the Hawthorne Foundation for Alternative Learning opened its doors. Nia stood in the bright, cheerful building, watching children work with specially trained teachers who understood that different didn't mean broken. The curriculum she'd developed was being used in pilot programs across the country. Elias had stepped back from his company to focus on the foundation, discovering that building something meaningful brought him more satisfaction than any business deal ever had. He and Nia worked side by side, their partnership deepening into something neither had expected but both treasured. Oliver flourished, becoming a confident young advocate for alternative education. He spoke at events, sharing his story to help other children understand they weren't alone. One evening, as the sun set over the mansion that no longer felt empty, the three of them gathered in what had once been Oliver's study room. The whiteboard was covered in equations, not for a lesson but just for fun. They were working on a puzzle together, each contributing ideas. "Wait, I think I see it," Oliver said, writing out a solution. "If we apply the fractal principle here." Nia leaned in, checking his work. "Brilliant. Now extend it one more level." Elias tried his hand at the next step and got it wrong, much to everyone's amusement. "I clearly need more practice," he said, laughing. "That's okay," Oliver said generously. "You just need someone to teach you in your language. Maybe we can find you a tutor." They all laughed, the sound filling the house with warmth and life. Later, after Oliver had gone to bed, Nia and Elias stood together looking at the fractal drawing that still hung in the study, the one Oliver had made all those months ago. Small changes leading to big transformations, Nia said softly, reading the principle of fractals in the image. That's what you did, Elias said. You came into our lives and changed everything, one small lesson at a time. We changed each other, Nia corrected. You taught me it was safe to stop running, to trust again, to use my gifts without fear. Elias took her hand. I never thanked you properly, for saving Oliver, for saving me, really. I was so lost in work and grief and distance that I'd forgotten how to be present, how to be a father. You reminded me what matters. Family matters, Nia said, in whatever form it takes. Upstairs, Oliver lay in bed, looking at the ceiling where he'd hung glow-in-the-dark stars in fractal patterns. He thought about everything that had changed since the morning Nia had first noticed his failed homework. He thought about how scared he'd been, how small and stupid he'd felt. He thought about the terrifying day she'd been forced to leave, and the joy of watching her return. He thought about standing in that courtroom, finding his voice, fighting for someone he loved. Most of all, he thought about the lesson Nia had taught him that had nothing to do with mathematics. That being different wasn't something to hide or fix, but something to celebrate and understand. He pulled out his notebook and wrote in careful letters, "Some equations don't need solving, they need understanding." It was something Nia often said, but Oliver was beginning to grasp what it really meant. Life wasn't about having all the answers or being perfect. It was about understanding yourself, supporting others, and having the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be. Downstairs, Nia and Elias stood together in comfortable silence, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The foundation was expanding, more children were enrolling, more teachers needed training. But tonight, they simply existed in the peace of knowing they'd built something beautiful from the wreckage of fear and pain. "Thank you," Elias said quietly, "for teaching us both how to live again." Nia leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stop hiding." And in that moment, in a mansion that had once echoed with loneliness, three people who'd each been lost in their own way had found their way home. Not because math had saved them, though it had helped, but because they'd learned that true intelligence meant recognizing what mattered most. Family, trust, courage, love. The equation was simple, really. You just had to understand the language. When someone sees your potential before you see it yourself, how far would you go to protect them from those who want to destroy it? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about courage, redemption, and the families we choose.